The stars had always called to humanity, but humanity had never expected the stars to call back. On a cold November morning, the sky above New York City turned dark at noon, not from clouds or eclipse, but from something far larger, a ship the size of Manhattan Island hung in the atmosphere, blocking the sun and casting a shadow over 8 million terrified people. Similar ships appeared over Beijing and London and Tokyo and Moscow and Sydney, 12 vessels in total, each one a mountain of black metal and glowing lights. The world held its breath and waited. Una Park was eating lunch in her office at the United Nations building when the first transmission came through. She was 37 years old with sharp eyes and a reputation for staying calm when everyone else panicked. She had negotiated peace deals in 3 different wars and talked down 2 potential nuclear conflicts. But nothing had prepared her for this. The message played on every screen, on every phone, on every radio on Earth simultaneously. A face appeared that was not human. The creature had skin like blue glass and 4 arms and eyes that glowed with inner light. When it spoke, the words came in perfect English and perfect Mandarin and perfect every language all at once. "I am High Admiral Telvok of the Galactic Hegemony," the creature said. "Your species has been detected and assessed. You exist at the pleasure of the hegemony. You will submit to integration." Una watched the message with growing horror as the alien listed its demands. 60% of Earth's resources would be transferred to hegemony control. 1 million humans would be provided annually for labor redistribution, which everyone understood meant slavery. All military forces would be disbanded immediately. All governments would answer to hegemony-appointed overseers. "You have 7 days to comply," the admiral finished. "Resistance is not advised. We have conquered 947 species before you. None have succeeded in opposing us." The transmission ended. The world exploded into chaos within hours. Una found herself standing before an emergency session of the United Nations General Assembly. Every seat was filled, and the air was thick with fear and anger. Some delegates demanded immediate surrender. Others called for nuclear strikes against the ships hovering overhead. Most simply sat in stunned silence. President David Kim of the United States addressed the assembly via video link. His face was tired, but his voice was steady. "We face an enemy we do not understand," he said. "They have technology we cannot match and numbers we cannot count. By every logical measure, we should surrender." The room grew quieter, but I did not become president to hand my people over to slavers, he continued, and I do not believe any leader in this room did either. "We have 7 days. Let us use them wisely." Una was appointed as Earth's official ambassador to the hegemony. It was not a job she wanted, but it was a job that needed doing. She spent the next 6 days in endless meetings with military leaders and scientists and diplomats from every nation. They argued and shouted and sometimes cried, but slowly a plan took shape. On the 6th day, Una boarded a small shuttle and flew up to meet the alien vessel. She was alone. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She had faced down warlords and dictators and terrorists. This was just one more bully who thought fear was the same as power. The shuttle docked, and she walked through corridors of strange metal into a massive chamber. High Admiral Telvok waited for her, surrounded by guards in gleaming armor. He towered over her by at least 3 feet, and his 4 arms were crossed with obvious impatience. "You come alone," the admiral said. "Either your species is brave or stupid, a little of both," Una replied. Telvok made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You have our terms. Do you accept?" Una spine and looked the alien directly in his glowing eyes. She thought of her parents who had fled North Korea with nothing. She thought of her grandmother who had survived the war and built a new life from ashes. She thought of every human who had ever been told to kneel and had chosen to stand instead. "Absolutely not," she said. The chamber went silent. The guards shifted their weapons. Telvok stared at her for a long moment. You understand what this means, he said slowly. You are declaring war on the galactic hegemony. We have ships beyond counting, weapons beyond your comprehension, soldiers who have fought for centuries. You have none of these things. Yuna smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. You came to our world, she said. You threatened our children. You demanded we become your slaves. And now you expect us to simply accept this because you are bigger and stronger. She took a step forward. You clearly have not studied human history. We have spent 10,000 years killing each other. We have survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have ended us. We have crawled out of every grave the universe has dug for us. And we are still here. Telvok leaned down until his face was close to hers. What makes you think you can survive us? Yuna did not flinch because we are too stupid and too stubborn to know when we are beaten. And because you have made a mistake that every bully eventually makes. You have given us something to unite against. She stepped back and spread her arms. Congratulations, High Admiral. You just declared war on the galaxy's deadliest species. We look forward to educating you. She turned and walked out of the chamber. The guards did not stop her. Perhaps they were too shocked. Perhaps Telvok wanted to see what would happen. Perhaps the universe simply recognized that something important had just changed. Back on Earth, the world watched her shuttle descend. President Kim met her on the landing pad. What did they say? He asked. They laughed at us, Yuna replied. They think we are insects. And what do you think? Yuna looked up at the massive ship still blocking the sun. She thought about the fear she had felt standing before that alien giant. She thought about how that fear had turned to something else entirely. I think she said that insects have conquered this planet for 400 million years. I think we learned from the best. The news spread across every nation within the hour. Humanity had refused to surrender. War was coming. War against an enemy that had never known defeat. War against ships that could crack planets. War against soldiers who had been fighting since before humans discovered fire. And yet something strange happened. Instead of despair, a different feeling spread. Instead of surrender, a different choice was made. Factories that had been rivals began sharing resources. Scientists who had competed for funding began sharing research. Soldiers from countries that had been enemies for generations began training together. The hegemony had given humanity 7 days to submit. They had accidentally given humanity something far more valuable. They had given humanity a reason to finally truly unite on the 7th day. As hegemony forces prepared to begin their conquest, they detected something unexpected. Every nuclear weapon on Earth was being moved. Not aimed at them, but repositioned, combined with conventional forces into defensive networks, built into systems the hegemony had never seen before. Telvok studied the reports with growing unease. He had conquered hundreds of species, and each one had followed the same pattern: despair and division and eventual acceptance. Humanity was doing something different. They are preparing to fight, his second-in-command observed. Yes, Telvok agreed. But that is not what concerns me. Then what does? Telvok looked at the blue planet below. A world of water and life, and impossible, stubborn creatures who refuse to accept their place in the universe. They are smiling. He said, they know they cannot win, and they are smiling. He did not understand yet, but he would. The war had begun, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. 3 months after Unipark told the hegemony to go to hell, the aliens finally attacked. Fleet Commander Voss led 200 warships toward Earth. His orders were simple: crush the primitives and move on to more important matters. The hegemony had conquered nearly 1,000 species before, and each conquest followed the same pattern: show overwhelming force and watch the enemy crumble. Voss expected this to take perhaps 6 hours. He was very wrong. General James Moon had spent those 3 months preparing. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and a face like cracked leather. He had fought in 3 wars and lost friends in each one. When the alien ships first appeared, he had felt the same fear as everyone else. But fear was just another enemy, and James Moon had been fighting enemies his whole life. The Earth Defense Coalition had been formed within days of the declaration of war. Every nation contributed what it could. The Americans brought their carriers and missiles. The Chinese brought their manufacturing power. The Russians brought their ruthlessness. The Europeans brought their engineering. The smaller nations brought their determination together. They built something new the hegemony expected to find a primitive world with primitive weapons. They found Luna instead. Earth's moon had been transformed in 90 days. Mining operations that would have taken years were completed in weeks. Thousands of workers lived in underground bunkers, eating recycled food and breathing recycled air. They worked until they collapsed, and then they got up and worked some more. They built railguns, hidden in craters and disguised as rocks. These magnetic cannons could launch projectiles at incredible speeds. They built missile platforms loaded with nuclear warheads modified by the brightest minds on Earth. They built drone swarms controlled by pilots who would never see their weapons but would guide them to their targets. Anyway, and they built something else, something no alien would expect: volunteers. 3,000 humans climbed into small, fast ships loaded with explosives. They knew they would not survive. They went anyway. When Voss brought his fleet into Earth orbit, he expected token resistance. He got the battle of Luna instead. The first wave of railgun fire caught the hegemony completely off guard. Massive metal slugs traveling at tremendous speeds tore through shields designed to stop energy weapons. 12 ships died in the first minute, 12 more died. In the second, Voss ordered his fleet to return fire, but the human weapons were hidden too well. Lunar dust and darkness concealed the railgun positions. The hegemony ships fired blindly, hitting rock and empty space, while more projectiles slammed into their hulls. Then the drones came. Thousands of them. Each one carried a single nuclear warhead. Each one was guided by a human pilot sitting in a bunker on Earth, watching through cameras and praying their signal would hold. The drones did not try to destroy the hegemony ships. They were too small for that. Instead, they targeted engines and weapons and sensor arrays. They blinded the enemy and crippled their ability to fight back, and then the volunteers attacked. Commander Su Min led the first wave. She was 29 years old, and she had a daughter back on Earth, a daughter she would never see again. She had written a letter and left it with her sister. She had cried when she sealed the envelope, and she had smiled when she climbed into her ship. For Lily, she whispered as her vessel slammed into the engine core of a hegemony cruiser. The explosion took out 3 ships. 2 more volunteers followed. One of them was a grandfather from Brazil. One was a teenager from Kenya. One was a retired teacher from Japan. They came from every nation and every background, and they died together. Voss watched his fleet burn around him. He had lost 63 ships in 19 hours. 63 ships to a species that had never left its own solar system. 63 ships to creatures who threw themselves at death like it was a gift. He ordered the retreat. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had won. Not the war, but a battle. The first battle, the impossible battle. The battle that proved they could fight back. General Moon did not celebrate. He stood in his command center and looked at the list of the dead. 3,000 volunteers who would never come home. Thousands more who had died in the crossfire. Civilians caught in debris falls and failed evacuations. Was it worth it? His aide asked. Moon did not answer immediately. He thought about his own children. Safe for now, but only because others had died to keep them that way. Ask me when the war is over, he said. While the military fought, the scientists worked. Dr. Grace Lee led Project Prometheus, a secret program to reverse engineer captured hegemony technology. She was 45 years old with calloused hands and permanent dark circles under her eyes. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the invasion began. Her team worked in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. They had fragments from destroyed enemy ships and one mostly intact fighter captured during the battle. They had the greatest minds on Earth, and they had something else. Aspiration hegemony had taken centuries to develop there. FTL drive Grace and her team cracked it in 4 months. They did not fully understand how it worked. They did not need to, they just needed to make it go. Colonel Michael Yang oversaw the military applications. He was a practical man who cared more about results than theories. When Grace showed him the prototype drive, he asked only one question. Can we build more? Grace pushed her glasses up. A habit she had when she was thinking. We can, she said. But it will take everything we have, every factory, every resource, every worker. We would have to bet the entire planet on this technology. And if it doesn't work, then we die. But we were going to die anyway. At least this way we die reaching for the stars. The second hegemony fleet arrived 6 months later. It was larger than the first. 300 ships commanded by Admiral Tevik, who had studied the Battle of Luna and learned from Voss. Mistakes. The battle lasted 3 days. This time the hegemony was prepared for the railguns and the drones and the suicide ships. They adapted their tactics and pushed through the lunar defenses. They reached Earth orbit and began bombarding the surface, but humanity had adapted too. The first human FTL ship launched from a hidden base in Antarctica. It was ugly and unstable and held together by desperate engineering. But it worked. Captain Kevin Song guided the vessel behind enemy lines and destroyed the hegemony supply ships. They had not expected an attack from behind. They had not expected humans to have FTL at all. Without supplies, the bombardment could not continue. Admiral Tevik faced a choice: retreat or starve. He retreated. Grace Lee watched the enemy fleet disappear from her screens. She was so tired she could barely stand, but she was smiling. How did you do it? Colonel Yang asked. How did you figure out their technology so fast? Grace thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about her team working endless hours. She thought about the thousands who had died to buy them time. She thought about humanity, spending 10,000 years fighting itself and finally having something worth fighting for. They have been comfortable for too long. She said, we have been desperate our entire existence. They forgot how to struggle. We never learned how to stop. Hegemony sent more fleets. Each time humanity learned, each time humanity adapted, each time humanity pushed back harder, and somewhere in the depths of space, High Admiral Telvok read reports he had never seen before in his 300-year career. Reports of retreat, reports of failure, reports of a primitive species that refused to know its place. He began to wonder if perhaps he had made a terrible mistake. The galaxy had rules. Everyone knew them. The strong conquered the weak. The advanced enslaved the primitive species, rose and fell, but the hegemony remained eternal. Then came the humans. By the end of the second year, word had spread to every corner. Of known space species, 948 refused to die. They had beaten back 4 invasion fleets. They had developed FTL technology in months instead of centuries. They had done something no conquered species had ever done. They had started fighting back. Captain Hannah Cho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first true warship built from scratch with stolen alien technology. She was 34 years old, with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much death. She had lost her parents in the first bombardment. She had lost her brother in the third fleet battle. She had nothing left except the war. The Defiance was not beautiful. It was a collection of human engineering and alien parts held together by welding and prayer. The crew joked that the ship ran on spite and coffee. They were not entirely wrong. Admiral Rachel Stone appeared on the main screen. Her hair had gone completely gray in the past 2 years, but her voice was still iron. Your mission is simple, Captain, she said. Strike Nexus Station. Hannah felt her crew tense around her. Nexus Station was 400 light years from Earth. It was the main supply depot for the entire hegemony war effort. Attacking it was insane. That is exactly why we are doing it, Stone continued. They will never expect it because no sane species would try it. We are not sane, Hannah replied. We are human. The Defiance launched with a crew of 300 volunteers. They had trained for 6 months on technology they barely understood. They had said goodbye to families they might never see again. They had chosen this mission knowing the odds. The journey took 11 days. 11 days of checking systems and running drills and trying not to think about what waited. At the end, Hannah spent most nights staring at the stars through the observation window. She thought about her mother who had loved astronomy. She thought about her father who had built telescopes in their backyard. She thought about her brother who had wanted to be an astronaut. I hope you can see this, she whispered to the darkness. I hope you know we are still fighting. Nexus Station was massive. 100 kilometers of metal and machinery floating in the void around a dying star. 17 supply ships clustered around it like piglets nursing from a sow. Defense platforms bristled with weapons. The station had never been attacked because no one had ever been foolish enough to try until now. Hannah gave the order and the Defiance dropped out of FTL directly behind the supply ships. The aliens had exactly 4 seconds of confusion before the first missiles launched. The battle was chaos. The Defiance was outgunned and outnumbered. But Hannah had something the hegemony did not. She had humans. Lieutenant Tommy Park flew the ship through impossible maneuvers, dodging fire that should have killed them a dozen times. Engineer Maria Santos kept the engines running through damage that would have crippled any other vessel. Weapons officer Jake Wilson fired with mechanical precision, destroying 3 supply ships before the enemy even returned fire. The station defenses activated, but they were designed to fight fleets, not single ships. The Defiance was too fast, too unpredictable, too insane. The platforms fired where the ship should have been and hit nothing but empty space. In 17 minutes, the Defiance destroyed all 17 supply ships, crippled the station's defensive grid, and transmitted a message across all hegemony frequencies: we are coming. Then they jumped to FTL and vanished. The effect was immediate panic spread through the hegemony military. If one human ship could strike their most important station, what else could humans do? Where else could they appear? How many more ships were coming? The answer was not many. Not yet, but the hegemony did not know that. All they knew was fear, while the Defiance made history. Ambassador Daniel Park suffered in darkness. He had been captured during the second invasion attempt. His shuttle had been disabled and boarded before he could destroy it. The hegemony had taken him alive because they wanted to understand. They wanted to know what made humans different. 8 months of interrogation. 8 months of tests and scans and questions. 8 months of pain that would have broken any other species. Daniel did not break. His cell was small and cold and lit by a single blue light. He had lost track of day and night long ago. He measured time by the visits of his interrogators, a tall alien named Veth, who asked endless questions, a shorter one named Call, who preferred physical methods, a silent observer who watched everything and said nothing. Why do your people resist? Veth asked for the 100th time. 'Cause we can, Daniel replied for the 100th time. The hegemony has never been defeated. You cannot win. Daniel laughed. It hurt his broken ribs, but he laughed anyway. You think this is about winning? Then what is it about? It's about making you earn it. Every planet, every city, every person. You want to conquer us. Fine. But you will bleed for every inch. You will lose ships and soldiers and time. And when you finally stand over our ashes, you will look at what it cost you, and you will wonder if it was worth it. Veth studied him with those glowing alien eyes. What if we simply destroy your world? We have weapons that can crack planets. Daniel smiled through bloody teeth. Then do it. But know this, even if you burn Earth to nothing, humans will survive somewhere. Somehow we are like a disease. Once you are infected, you can never get rid of us. We will spread. We will multiply. We will remember, and one day when you least expect it, we will come for you. Interrogations continued, but something changed. The questions became less about military secrets and more about human nature. They wanted to understand how a species could be so stubborn, so spiteful, so utterly unwilling to accept defeat. Daniel gave them answers. He told them about human history, about wars that lasted generations, about feuds that survived centuries, about grudges passed down through bloodlines until no one remembered how they started. He told them about Thermopylae and Masada and Stalingrad, about humans who chose death over surrender, about armies that fought to the last soldier. The hegemony had conquered species who calculated odds and made logical decisions. They had never encountered a species that would burn its own cities rather than let them fall. They had never encountered humans. On the 243rd day of his captivity, Daniel made his move. He had been planning for months, watching the guards, learning their patterns, memorizing the layout of the facility. He had pretended to be weaker than he was letting them think he was broken. He taught 3 guards to play poker. It was just a game, he told them. A way to pass the time. They believed him. They did not understand that poker was not about cards. It was about reading people, about patience, about waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When that moment came, Daniel moved. The first guard died. Before he knew what happened, Daniel strangled him with the chains they used to bind him. The second guard turned, and Daniel took his weapon. The third guard tried to run, and Daniel shot him in the back. Then he fought 16 levels of a detention facility. Hundreds of guards, weapons he barely knew how to use. Daniel killed and ran and hid and killed again. He lost an eye to a blade that came too close. He lost 2 fingers to a door that closed too fast. He kept going. When he finally reached a shuttle bay, he was barely conscious. Blood loss and pain and exhaustion had pushed him to the edge of death. But he climbed into an alien ship and he flew through. Days later, he crashed on the moon of a liberated human outpost. He was carrying stolen data drives filled with hegemony intelligence, military positions, fleet movements, weakness in their supply lines. The information would turn the war when they pulled him from the wreckage. He was smiling. "Tell my sister," he whispered before losing consciousness. "We are still fighting." Humanity was no longer fighting alone. The hegemony had conquered 947 species before humans. Some of those species had been slaves for centuries, others for millennia. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. They had accepted their chains as natural. Then they watched the humans fight. The first species to join was the Valk, a small people with gray skin and large eyes who had been conquered 800 years ago. They had served as laborers and servants for so long that rebellion seemed impossible, and they saw humans fly suicide missions into hegemony ships. They saw humans refuse to surrender even when cities burned around them. They saw humans laugh in the face of death. "If they can fight," the Velk leader told his people then, "so can we." The Velk uprising cost them 3 million lives. But when it was over, they had liberated their homeworld and joined humanity's alliance. The second species was the Tor, massive creatures twice the size of humans who had been used as shock troops for the hegemony. They had been bred for war and taught to obey without question. Then a human soldier named Private Jenny Kim saved a wounded Tor during a battle. She could have left him. She could have shot him. Instead, she dragged him to safety and treated his wounds. "Why?" the Tor asked. When he woke, Jenny shrugged. "Because you were hurt." The Tor did not understand. This was not how enemies behaved. This was not how anyone behaved. He returned to his people and told them what had happened. Within a month, half the Tor military had defected. By year 3, humanity led an alliance of 3 species against the hegemony. The numbers were still against them. The hegemony controlled 944 worlds. The alliance controlled 12. But those 12 worlds fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kevin Song stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. He was 41 years old with scars on his hands and gray in his hair. He had fought in more battles than he could count and lost friends in all of them. Today he would fight the most important battle of the war. Karth Prime was the hegemony primary shipyard, the place where their warships were built and repaired. Intelligence from Daniel Park's stolen data had revealed its location and its defenses. 200 hegemony warships protected the station. The Allied fleet had 102 ships, 42 human, 30 Velk, 30 Tor. The numbers said they should lose. Admiral Song did not believe in numbers. All ships. This is Song, he said over the fleet communication channel. Today we break their spine. Every ship we destroy, here is one that never threatens Earth. Every shipyard we burn is a year they cannot rebuild. They wanted to enslave us. We are going to remind them why that was a mistake. The fleet jumped to FTL. They emerged from faster than light travel in perfect formation. The hegemony defenders scrambled to respond, but the Allied fleet had surprise on their side. The first volley of missiles took out 15 enemy ships before they could raise shields. High Admiral Telvuk commanded the defense from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was 312 years old and had never lost a battle. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds and broken species who dared to resist. He looked at the human ships with contempt. They are outnumbered. He told his officers, this will be quick. He was wrong. The humans did not fight like other species. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They swarmed. They fainted. They sacrificed ships to create openings for others. They fought dirty and mean and without any respect for the rules of civilized warfare. The Velk fought beside them, small and quick. Their ships darted through gaps in the Vez hegemony formation, striking weak points and vanishing before retaliation could find them. Tor fought behind them, massive vessels built for close combat. They absorbed fire that would have destroyed other ships and kept coming. Their weapons tore through hegemony armor like paper. Admiral Song conducted the battle like a symphony. Every ship had a role. Every movement had a purpose. When the hegemony tried to concentrate their fire, he spread his forces. When they spread out, he concentrated his. And then Dr. Jenny Park revealed her masterpiece. Had spent 2 years developing the Prometheus bomb, a weapon that destabilized FTL drives, causing them to tear holes in space-time. The explosion of a single drive was catastrophic. A chain reaction of multiple drives was apocalyptic. The bomb was carried by a single ship, piloted by a single volunteer commander, Lucas Kim. He was 57 years old with a wife and 3 children back on Earth. He had written them letters. He had said his goodbyes. He had made peace with what he was about to do for Earth, he said, as his ship dove toward the heart of the hegemony formation. The Prometheus bomb detonated inside the Eternal Dominion. The explosion caught 7 other ships in its radius. Their drives destabilized and exploded, catching more ships, which caught more ships. The chain reaction spread like fire through dry grass in 30 seconds. 43 hegemony vessels ceased to exist. High Admiral Telvuk had exactly enough time to understand what was happening. Before his flagship tore itself apart, he sent one final transmission. How they are, children. How are children doing? This to us, the answer died with him. But the humans could have told him they were not children. They were survivors. Every generation of humanity had faced extinction. Ice ages, plagues, wars, their own stupidity. Each time they should have died. Each time they found a way to live. The hegemony had conquered species who surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. Species who calculated odds and accepted defeat. When the numbers said they could not win, species who behaved rationally. Humans were not. Rational humans were stubborn and spiteful and absolutely unwilling to admit when they were beaten. They would fight to the last soldier, the last ship, the last breath. And even then they would find ways to hurt you from beyond the grave. The battle of Karth Prime lasted 6 hours. The Alliance lost 19 ships, The hegemony lost 137, including their flagship and their greatest. Admiral, when it was over, Admiral Song stood on his bridge and watched the shipyard burn. Fires bloomed across the massive structure as secondary explosions tore it apart. Years of hegemony production capacity gone in a single-day status report. He requested Commander. Annalie checked her displays. 19 ships lost. She reported 40. 2 damaged. But the shipyard is destroyed, sir. We estimate this sets their production back by at least 3 years. Song nodded. 3 years. 3 years for humanity to build more ships, train more soldiers, liberate more worlds. 3 years that had been bought with blood and sacrifice and the kind of desperate courage that only came from having nothing left to lose. Send a message to Earth, he said. Tell them we won. Tell them the war is not over, but today we broke them. Tell them Commander Kim. And everyone else who died here, they did not die for nothing. He paused, looking at the stars that had once seemed so distant and now felt almost close enough to touch, and tell them, he added, that we are coming for the rest. Year 5. The end of everything, and the beginning of something new. Fleet Admiral Hannah Cho stood on the observation deck of the UES Humanity and looked at the armada she commanded. 1,200 ships from 17 species, all following humanity's lead, all ready to finish what the hegemony had started. 5 years ago, she had been a captain of 1 ship. Now she commanded the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen assembled. Against the hegemony, the journey to this moment had cost more than she could calculate. Billions dead across dozens of worlds. Cities burned to ash, families torn apart. Children who would never know their parents. Parents who would never hold their children again. Hannah carried those losses with her every day. They were heavy, but she did not let them slow her down. The dead deserve better than grief. The dead deserve victory. The hegemony homeworld hung in space before her, a planet of silver towers and ancient power, the heart of an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 12,000 years. The place where it would all end. Secretary General Una Park appeared on the main screen. She was 42 now, with lines on her face that had not been there when the war began. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was strong. She had started this journey with 2 words: absolutely not. Now she would finish it. 5 years ago, she said to the assembled fleet, they came to our world and demanded our submission. They called us primitive. They called us weak. They gave us 7 days to surrender. Her image was broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Every soldier heard her voice. Every species that had joined humanity's cause listened today. We give them the same courtesy. 7 days to accept unconditional surrender. After that, we will do what humans have always done when someone tries to destroy us. She paused and smiled, that same smile she had given High Admiral Telvok so long ago. We will survive whatever it takes. The fleet held position while the ultimatum was delivered. The Hegemony Council had 7 days to respond. 7 days to accept that their empire was over. 7 days to choose between surrender and annihilation. On the first day, they sent insults, demands that the Alliance withdraw, threats of weapons that could destroy planets. On the second day, they sent their remaining fleet, 300 ships that had been held in reserve, the last defenders of an empire that had never known defeat. The Battle of the Hegemony homeworld lasted 12 hours. Admiral Kevin Song led the main assault. His ships carved through the enemy formation like a blade through flesh. The Hegemony fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Their time had passed, and they knew it. The Velk ships targeted communication stations, cutting off the enemy ability to coordinate. The Tor vessels absorbed punishment that would have destroyed lesser craft and kept advancing. The humans did what humans always did. They found ways to win that no one expected when it was over. The Hegemony fleet was gone. 280 ships destroyed, 20 more captured. The rest scattered into the void, never to threaten anyone again. On the third day, the Hegemony Council sent new messages. No longer threats, now pleas, offers of negotiation. promises of reform. On the fourth day, they surrendered. Ambassador Daniel Park led the delegation that accepted the surrender. He walked with a limp now and wore a patch over his missing eye. His hands were scarred and 2 fingers were gone, but he walked tall and his remaining eye was clear. He had survived 8 months of torture to bring home intelligence that changed the war. Now he would end it. The surrender ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the Hegemony Council, a chamber that had seen 1,000 species kneel before it. Now those species stood as witnesses, while the hegemony knelt before them. By the authority of the United Earth Government and its allies, Daniel said, I accept your unconditional surrender, all hegemony. Military forces will stand down immediately. All conquered worlds will be granted independence. All slaves will be freed. All war criminals will face justice. The council leader, an ancient creature with faded crystal skin, looked at Daniel with something like despair. We built this empire over 12,000 years, he said. How did you destroy it in 5? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about Una and her 2 words that started everything. He thought about the volunteers who flew suicide missions. He thought about Grace Lee and her impossible science. He thought about every human who had refused to give up when giving up was the only logical choice. You made us fight for our survival, Daniel replied. And there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a human fighting for survival. The peace treaty established the new Galactic Federation, a coalition of equals where no species ruled over others. The hegemony as an empire was dissolved. Its people would survive, but they would never again hold power over others. Humanity did not seek to replace one empire with another. They had not fought for 5 years to become the thing they destroyed. They fought for something simpler and harder, a chance to reach for the stars without chains. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to heal. Dr. Grace Lee received the Galactic Prize for Scientific Achievement for her work on FTL technology. She donated the credits to fund schools on liberated worlds. Children who had been born into slavery would learn to read and write and dream. Admiral Kevin Song married his longtime partner, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Reed, in the first human wedding ceremony held on Alien World. Representatives from 12 species attended the celebration. Lasted 3 days. Captain Hannah Cho retired from military service. She had given enough. She bought a small house on a quiet moon and spent her days watching the stars. She was finally at peace. President David Kim stepped down after his 3rd term, passing leadership to the next generation. He had guided humanity through its darkest hours. Now he could rest. Secretary General Una Park continued her work building connections between species, turning former enemies into friends, laying the foundation for a future that would last millennia. And across the galaxy, a new saying spread among species who had once cowered under hegemony rule: if you want to survive, make friends with the humans. If you wanted to die, make them your enemy. The deadliest species in the galaxy had not conquered through cruelty or overwhelming technology. They had conquered through something far more dangerous. They simply refused to give up. On the anniversary of first contact, Una Park gave a speech at the memorial built on the spot where the first hegemony ship had appeared 5 years earlier. She had stood before an alien tyrant and told him no. Now she stood before a crowd of humans and aliens united in peace. They asked us to kneel, she said. We taught them to fear. They expected us to die. We taught them to respect. They tried to make us slaves. We made ourselves legends. She looked up at the stars that had once seemed so threatening and now shone with promise. We are humanity. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. And we have only just begun. The crowd cheered. Humans and Vulcan, Tor, and a dozen other species, all standing together, all looking toward a future they would build with their own hands. The war was over. The real work was just beginning, and somewhere out in the endless dark, new species looked toward the stars and heard stories of the humans, the creatures who had faced an empire and won, the species that would not die, the deadliest thing the galaxy had ever. No, not because they were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but because they never ever stopped fighting. The end.